Hi, good evening. My name is Eric Tam, and I'm a senior lecturer in the National University of Singapore in AI and data science. Today, I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts on explainable AI in finance. But firstly, let me thank the organizers, the Water Technology, for inviting me for this talk. So, this topic, which is in the minds of many people, is definitely very important. We all know that AI models are known to be black boxes, and there have been a great technical backlash against using AI models. You know, especially in the areas of finance, it's all right if it's been used in for facial recognition. It's all right if it's been used for voice recognition. But when it comes to money, when it comes to your finances, you have to know exactly what is AI is doing to your money. It involves ethics, involves transparency, and involves to some biasness that needs to be eradicated in this area. And so, what is the status quo in AI in finance? For that matter, AI, there's a universal approximation term that allows the AIs to model any relationships with deeper and more neural networks that happens, in the last 10 years. Deep learning, however, has its own disadvantages. It's very opaque. Not so much an issue with other areas of AI, but definitely in finance. What are the recent advances then in this AI explainability? There have been great advances made by Google, by Stanford, in the areas of Lime, Shapely, and some of the new libraries that have been integrated into the TensorFlow libraries. It's done a great job, but it still has not answered the question, why do AI models work in finance? We all know that all the models that have been in place, they are usually an afterthought. They are an afterthought after you've built the AI model. They are largely on feature importance, and most of them differ by how they're obtained. The computation, the derivation, but it all goes down to the fact that they all highlight which feature is important. It doesn't still quite explain why do AI models work in finance. And that's what we're going to now. If you recognize that AI is about discovering relationships, then we have to go into a bit deeper. What are these relationships in finance? AI does it in a data-driven manner. It allows you to find patterns that is in finance. But to understand deeper, you have to understand the financial theory. And that is what I would like to impress on you. In the area of financial theory, there are a few areas which really overlap with AI. For example, we have stochastic calculus. This stochastic calculus is a very broad field that was very popular in quantitative finance 10 years ago and even now. For example, we have the CNN, which is something similar to Gilsonov theorem in stochastic calculus. We have also the emerging field, behavioral finance, and that itself is very similar to some of the models that we have in AI. For example, attention, transformer models, which kind of have similarity with the contextual memory models. More about this. Let's talk about stochastic calculus and quantitative finance. In CNN, we have a rolling sliding window that pull together all the features together and give you a maximum value or average value. It takes a weighted sum that you can see on the screen here. This weighted sum is very much similar to stochastic finance, stochastic calculus, in which it takes the Gilsonov theorem and takes a weighted probability distribution in order to derive asset prices. This is a key similarity between CNN and Gilsonov theorem here. This is one particular example that AI can be explained probably through stochastic calculus. Another example, contextual memory. Recently, deep psychology models have entered into the space of behavioral finance. One recent paper, for example, talks about how humans remember episodes from past in the context. For example, we have the present COVID-19 crisis. So the first thing that comes to mind was recession. So people go into the Google search and the Google recession. And What comes to mind broadly was the Lehman crisis. Some attention in the memory, some focus in the memory models of the investors, of the general public. This brings to mind some very popular AI model called attention. And that is actually the latest advances in AI transformer models, which was just recently in 2018. There's a lot of similarity between transformer models, which uses multi-headed attention, with contextual memory, which brings to attention some events in the past. So that is another area, behavioral finance, contextual memory, can be used to explain how AI works actually in finance. Now, in conclusion, I would like to highlight that for AI to actually work, to really understand how AI works in finance, there's a need to understand the financial theory. There's a need to understand the cross-disciplinary finance and how AI models work. This is an area which I myself am very interested in, been given a background in finance as well as recently I do lecturing in AI and data science. Otherwise, AI would purely just be curve fitting, would just be trying to find relationship fitting. And that has actually been raised up by many AI experts. And the thought was that if it's just curve fitting, soon AI could enter another winter. But let's infuse into AI models the understanding of finance, financial theory. In this case, I cited two examples, stochastic calculus, as well as behavioral contextual memory models. Right. So these are some of the fields in finance that can help to explain how AI models actually work. Thank you very much. So this is all what I would like to share. Remember, AI has to go along with financial theory. Thank you very much again. So this is my context, and thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Collins, Chief Executive Officer of Tourstone Technology, and I'd like to talk to you about my experiences on cloud, big data, and automation over the next few minutes. So let's give a little bit of context in terms of what Tourstone is. We're a global provider of cloud-based securities and derivatives post-trade processing solutions, so software as a service effectively. We work across the globe in all three time zones with banks from tier 1 all the way down to tier 3, covering sort of risk aggregation, middle office, back office, and right through to accounting. But this is a lightning presentation, so I'll move at quick speed. Want to let you know why we moved to the cloud. I think the first thing to talk about is the direct cost savings. So at the machine level, you don't really get a huge amount of saving. If you've got 100% utility on a machine in your machine room, you put that in the cloud, you're gonna slightly cost you more. So you have to think about all the other type of cost savings. So one of them is sort of burst activity. So if you need a sudden burst, obviously a machine has a certain capacity. If you need that extra burst, then it's a very cost-effective way to move into the cloud. But I think all the general benefits really come from, and certainly what we've benefited from and why we went down this direction, is fast deployment. I no longer have to go out and purchase a machine. I just sort of literally press of a button, can get the machine up and running. So for our clients and new clients deployments, that's very fast. The flexibility of instant scaling, I think we will talk about COVID as I'm sure later on, but that instant scale we needed when sort of volumes took off was there again almost automatically. Future proofing, I think don't underestimate the savings that you can get from not having to change machines, not having to upgrade operating systems. All that change management disappears completely, you know, forgetting about the space of a machine room you needed as well. But finally, I think one of the big things I've seen over the last couple of years as a real U-turn is on cybersecurity. So I think given, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I think people were very nervous about the cloud because I'm putting my data out in the cloud and, you know, is it secure? those providers of cloud, or certainly the major providers of cloud, are spending far much more money than certainly I could have afford as a vendor, and even some of the sort of tier 2 banks can afford. So I think that's almost turned on its head, and people are now seeing the cloud as actually potentially a more secure environment than their own machine rooms. So that's why, I guess, how do we start it? If you're, in early days, this for us was sort of 5 or 6 years ago, testing the water, some cost-effective ways of doing that, your DR site or BCP utility. We had to originally have full capacity in our DR site, so the same number of machines as we do in production. But obviously, you're not using that. We replicate real time the information, but you haven't got all the users and all the reports running. So that's actually a quite cost-effective way of sort of starting off and testing the water with cloud. The other mention in terms of risk calculations and putting some of the additional capacity you need on the cloud can be quite effective. And that mixed environment, I think the only thing to be careful of is the network capacity you need between the two environments. It's better when you've got wholesale environments shifted to the cloud. Moving forward, I guess some of the things that we looked at in the past, we didn't use very specific features of cloud providers, so it allowed us transferability from one cloud provider to another. We happen to use AWS, and we've been very, very happy with the relationship and partnership we've got with them. But we want to protect ourselves from the future, and also, I guess, looking at when to start sort of the big initiatives on the cloud, and I think that's where change comes up. So if you are trying to change a particular environment, then you start looking at the vendors that are already cloud enabled, that help you move that way. Again, we'll talk more about COVID, but I think the two things that I've seen that's really sort of escalated the move to cloud is that market volatility and being able to cope with that instantaneous uptick in volumes, and the remote working, which as you can see we're all doing now. That remote working on the client side and outsourcing some of that to the cloud as your desktop, I think, is very useful. Moving on at lightning speed again, big data. So we've started to use big data. Why did we? I think one of the reasons is we felt we had very good data quality, and I think that's what you do need. So getting the right data gets you the right results. We're in the post-trade, so we've got very high quality data that's lots of client activity that's reconciled with the outside world, and books and records. So it's in a position where you already know that it's good quality. But why did we want to go to the next stage? I think because there is some data insight that you can get by putting it into a slightly different technical environment. You can get very large scale data sets that provide you, very quick analysis of that data. So you can start mixing other data into that, the sort of some unstructured data as well from the client, and give more insight. And certainly I think it creates a fantastic foundation for the future, and in particular AI automation, which we'll come on to. So how did we start it? Well, we created a data lake, as we called it. So we replicate the data from our relational database. We mix that with the less structured data from clients or from external sources. And initially, we've started to use it for regulatory reporting and management reporting. Nice and easy because it's we actually use AWS's Athena. It's got an SQL interface, so we've not had to sort of rechange the way that we interrogate our data. But I would say, be careful what you put into that data lake. Don't just drown in your data lake, as somebody mentioned to me. That quality of data going in there, you have to be very careful about putting in good quality data from the beginning and to get the right results. So I wanted to go through, in terms of cloud and big data platforms, I think there's a list of things here that I'm welcome to sort of send you the presentation afterwards. But I wanted to move on quickly onto the automation side. So I think firstly, the non-AI automation, that brings the most benefits. Getting, moving away from that legacy system to a standard rules-based, logical, repeatable results gives you the biggest benefit. You throw out exceptions, and examples that we've got in our equities area is we're very volume insensitive, up to 99% straight through processing. So that is one big benefit. I think people shouldn't underestimate that sort of leap. But it also, being on a more cloud-based platform, gives you a great infrastructure that future-proofs you for the AI automation to come. And I think even that AI automation can feed back into this more standard, as we would say, rules-based automation engine. So AI automation, as that sort of comes along, I think, why now? I used to delve in my youth in neural networks over 25 years ago, showing my age. But why now? It's because the cost of the processing is much cheaper, and the cost of data storage much cheaper. So AI is incredibly viable for now. Where is it going to get used? And I've seen it used in all sorts of different places. Some of the things like natural language and language translation, I think, is all day to day. We see that ourselves. Some great stories about the insight that provided from patterns. Certainly in our space, sort of operational efficiencies and picking out, maybe the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your clients only take 20% of the effort to support. But I think moving forward, those AI automation techniques will allow even the exceptions that you're providing in more complex areas like the derivatives, allows you to process the what I've called exceptions to the exceptions, as it were. So as a lightning presentation, I guess I wanted to thank you very much for listening to, I guess, my experiences. We do have a white paper out there that we did with a joint venture with Celent on the efficiency of cloud and automation. But you're welcome to talk to or email me or look on our website to download the white paper. And thank you very much for listening.
Hello, and welcome to Exploring the Top Technology Trends Shaping the Future of the Capital Markets, part of Waters Technology's Innovation Exchange, a global virtual exchange connecting leaders and experts exploring the future of data and technology across the industry. My name is Victor Anderson, and I'm Global Content Director of Waters Technology. Now, as you probably already know, the Innovation Exchange runs from the 9th to the 22nd of September. And during this first event module, we'll be exploring technology and transformation across the capital markets. This week, we'll delve deeper into emerging technology trends, financial innovation, and technology adoption themes across our industry. Now, I'm happy to introduce members of today's panel to you. Claire Liu, who is a data scientist at Hong Kong Broadband Network. There she is. Arvind Joshi, Director of Data Management Lead at Scotiabank. Hi, Arvind. And finally, Brian Collins, Chief Executive of Torstone Technology. And Torstone is a technology provider to capital markets firms. Now, as we all know, the impact of COVID-19 continues to be felt across the financial services industry. And decision makers within the capital markets are formulating their 2021 plans as we speak, their business, operational, and technology plans, etc. Which means this is a perfect opportunity for us to discuss the tech trends that are currently shaping our industry. Today, we'll be focusing on three key areas. We'll be looking at cloud, we'll be looking at big data and data analytics, and finally, we'll also be looking at AI and the various technologies that fall under the AI umbrella. Now, we've got a great lineup of questions that we're going to be addressing through the course of this next 40 or so minutes. But before then, what I'd like to do is ask Claire and then Arvind and finally Brian just to introduce themselves and just explain a little bit about what they do on a day-to-day basis within their organizations, and then we can get cracking with the with our agenda. So over to you, Claire.
Okay. Hello, this is Claire. I'm currently a data scientist at Hong Kong Broadband Network. My job is provide some consulting service to our clients to let them understand how to transform their business. In the meantime, I'm also an author at several publications, including KD Nugget and Tourist Data Science. Nice to meet you all here.
Thanks, Claire. Arvind.
Hi there. I'm Arvind Joshi. I'm part of US Finance. My team primarily is responsible for execution of day-to-day data management activities, remediation of data quality issues, and implementation of change management processes. I also serve as the data governance officer for US Finance, and as such, I'm the primary point of contact for all US Finance data matters.
Good. Thanks for that, Arvind, and thanks for joining today's panel. And finally, over to you, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Collings. I'm CEO of Tourstone Technology. And as you mentioned, Tourstone Technology is very much in the post-trade space, software as a service in capital markets, spanning everything from risk, middle office, back office, and accounting. So a very varied job for me as a CEO.
Good, good. Thank you for that. All right. Let's start today's discussion. And what I'd like to do is, just for our audience members, let's, as a point of departure for today's chat, let's briefly talk about COVID-19. We can't not talk about COVID-19 given its massive impact on our industry. So let's start with talking a little bit about COVID-19 and the effect on technology trends that it has had already in terms of shaping the capital markets. So from your own personal experience, to what extent has COVID influenced data and technology trends across the industry? And might, at some point in the future, might we look back at at Q1 and Q2 2020 and see it as a kind of a watershed, a really crucial period in our industry where we said, yes, there's been massive change in such a short amount of time, and it was all due to COVID-19 acting as this incredible kind of catalyst for change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Claire to start from her perspective, and then Arvind, and then finally Brian. And remember, guys, please don't speak when you're on mute, because obviously we won't be able to hear you. So Claire, first point to you. To what extent has, in your opinion, has COVID shaped the direction and consumption trends of data and technology across our industry? Claire? Can't hear you.
Let me share my
Okay.
experience in Hong Kong and in the financial industry. Due to the COVID-19 and social unrest in Hong Kong, the retail industry is facing an unprecedented challenge at the moment. So the consumer behavior has been changing. Like in the past few years, we may visit the physical stores, but nowadays we tend to go to the e-commerce to purchase stuff. So the usage of digital payment has been increasing a lot and a lot. I would like to share a story with you guys. It's Hong Kong TV Mall. It's Hong Kong's largest 24 online shopping mall. It's established in 2018. At that moment, people think, oh, this won't be a successful business because people would like to visit the store using the money, cash, instead of using the digital payment. But due to the COVID-19, people, even my parents, they are not tech savvy. They have to use digital payment to do the transactions. So their customer behavior has been changing a lot. And now the CEO from HKTV Mall, Ricky Wong, he announced a very impressive result of their company. Within the period of COVID-19, the sales revenue has been increased triple times compared to last year's. So it's very impressive, and I believe in the future more people will tend to use more digital payments. And I think one of the very innovative and entrepreneurial way that they are doing it. They tend to work with different banks leveraging API technology. So customers can can enjoy their shopping, enjoy their journey online on applications like HKTV Mall app. So I think it's very good because it's another way to work with bank and other e-commerce companies to provide an end-to-end customer journey, to enrich their journey. I can say it in this way. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Arvind, let's talk a little bit more about from a kind of a capital markets perspective. Obviously, Scotiabank, big capital markets player. To what extent has COVID shaped, from where you're sitting, COVID shaped data and technology trends from your perspective?
Sure. So data and technology was in the forefront, like within capital markets and Scotia itself. But COVID accelerated the deployment or usage of digital technology in the market, especially the digital experience, as most of the transactions are being done like online, including some of the major even M&A and other big deals. So the digital technology or implementation of digital technology was, I would say, very much accelerated due to COVID-19. It's an unfortunate thing that it should happen this way, but in a way, I would say yes, this has taken leaps and bounds in terms of in capital markets implementation of these technologies.
Good. Okay. I'd like to put the same question to you, Brian, but perhaps you want to take a slightly different perspective, and that is, what are you hearing from your clients, and what are you kind of, obviously you got capital markets clients all over the place. Have you identified any themes, any trends that you're seeing? Is there greater demand for cloud-based services, for example, maybe cloud-native technologies, etc.? I know that's going to come up later on in our conversation, but as head of an organization like Torstone, what are you seeing from the marketplace that has resulted as from COVID-19?
Yeah, very much. I think the cloud, let's start with that. That provides so much flexibility. So I think one of the things that we saw, particularly as COVID started back in the sort of March, April timeframe, the market volatility, was crazy, and the volume of transactions that we were processing for peak times, one or 2 day peak times, was 4 to 5 times the normal volume of our clients, and that flexibility of cloud, I think, was just beautiful to see. The instant scale that you can get with the cloud, and I think conversely, I think there were other financial firms on legacy systems. I think we heard in the market, that fixed capacity was causing problems, particularly around sort of margining, etc. I come really more from the institutional rather than the retail side, so I think a lot of my experience is around that sort of sheer processing and the flexibility that the cloud provided in that incident. So I think what it's done, I think it's highlighted to the market that people start, if they're not thinking about it now, they really need to start thinking about how they use the cloud more effectively.
Let me add another question and put that to you, Brian. In terms of a provider of services to institutional organizations, to what extent did COVID-19 put a company like Torstone under pressure to maintain the depth and breadth and quality of the services it provides its clients? Was there a mad scramble, or was it kind of, did you just, because there is so much technology sitting in the cloud anyway, it was really just business as usual?
It was indeed. I mean, we felt very lucky, compared with many other companies. We felt very lucky. It was business as usual. I think our focus and the focus of our clients in the immediate instance was actually more the remote working. So the actual process, day-to-day processing, was not a problem. The automated and the automation that was there, I think, sort of helped, and the scaling was instantaneous. So no problem there. I think it was more. People did scrabble a little bit about the remote working, and are those setups, of people got the right permissioning and the networking, and I think we're all getting used to video calls now in the remote working as we've seen. And I think it was that rather than the actual processing. So actually very smooth, smooth for us as an operational process to go and work remotely, because we did have a work from home policy, so it was quite easy for us to have our developers and our support people at home working, but actually reasonably straightforward for our clients as well.
Just a final thing, a final point, Brian. To what extent might where is Tourstone right now in terms of kind of getting staff back to work? Do you anticipate there ever being a move where getting everybody back to how they were working before January 2020, for example?
I think it's definitely changed my attitude to thinking, as we're bringing, we continue to hire through this whole sort of COVID period, and it's definitely changed my thinking about how we take that forward. We've always been using a sort of a sort of cloud-based technology on the server side, but we've started to do a lot more on the desktop side as well to make sort of hot desking very easy. So at this point, I think we've got a desk for everybody in the company, but I can see in a few months' time, maybe we don't need that. So it's definitely changed my thinking. Good.
Okay, let's leave that there. But we're talking about the cloud, and let's stay on the theme of the cloud. And I'm going to put this question to Arvind initially, and then I'll ask Claire to respond as well if she can, and Brian too. Let's talk a little bit about cloud. Clearly, cloud is it's been on the technology agenda for lots of firms for a number of years already. But I think, if anything, COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of cloud and the benefits of cloud. And Brian, you mentioned the incredible elasticity that cloud provides technology users. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges associated with the cloud, and let's talk about what firms tend to underestimate when either placing data in the cloud or consuming cloud-based applications. Arvind, what would you say to that? Kind of challenges around the cloud. It's not as simple as basically just saying we're going to take the cloud route and everything's all okay. There are challenges. What are those challenges?
Two bigger challenges, like at least from my perspective, is first is the MNPI, the Material Non-Public Information, and the PII, which is very, at least in US, it's under very strict regulatory scrutiny. And then that, like many of the firms, tend to not take that into consideration as a big factor. And then later that comes back, and then they have to reconsider quite a few options which they might have gone forward in terms of technology, or even discussing how the data would be deployed as well as used. Also, the client's ability, or clients, I would say not ability, it's to participate in this cloud transformation or journey is also critical, which many of the banks or firms do not factor in. And many a times then later, they face challenges in convincing their customers or clients to be okay with hosting the data on the cloud.
Okay. Claire, do you have anything to add to that? Just in terms of the challenges facing financial services firms with respect to placing data in the cloud, kind of what do they underestimate in terms of the challenges around that?
Yes, when I was working at bank last year, one of the scorecard is we should put most of our data on cloud, but I feel like they have some problems. For example, some of the working procedures. Some managers, they may underestimate the cost and the time to put data on cloud. I can say in a bank, data are stored in different servers. So we can say it's kind of a little bit fragmented. So if you want to be more organized and to put the data on the cloud, we should have a plan to make sure everything goes well, and we know how to deliver deliver the information on cloud. And the other thing is we need to reduce the data redundancies, because different teams, they may not have the proper communications, but they are using the same data sets. So if they all put the same data on the cloud, so it will be cause the redundancy. So we need to spend extra time and extra cost to solve the problem. So this is one of the challenges that I have observed.
So there's a lot of duplication, in other words, right? Different business units within the same organization putting data in the cloud, and you're getting kind of massive duplication and massive duplication of effort as well in doing that. Okay, good. All right, Brian, from your perspective, what do capital markets firms, in your experience, what do they underestimate in terms of the challenges when it comes to working in the cloud?
Yeah, and I think I've probably got a slightly different angle here. I think quite often I see what they underestimate are the benefits. So, you know, if you look at a machine for a machine basis, so if you've got 100% utilized machine in your machine room and you want to put that in the cloud, it will cost you more, you know, slightly more, but it will cost you more. And I think all the softer benefits in terms of that speed of deployment, the flexibility it gives you, I think are underestimated. You need to sort of think, doing a small piece, I don't think you get those benefits. I think you have to, you know, move a whole section. And I think to Claire's point, you know, if you get too fragmented, then you're not getting the best of both worlds there. You're getting the worst because you're duplicating it. I think you have to sort of move lock, stock and barrel a particular unit. So, you know, in our case, obviously it's the post-trade, it's fully on the cloud. And that gives you a huge amount of sort of flexibility and future-proof as well. All those changes that you would normally have to do in a machine room and buying kit, etc., you know, does disappear.
Yeah. And so in a phrase, we're talking about economies of scale, right? It doesn't, you need to be moving large numbers of processes to the cloud as opposed to a single process, because then it just doesn't make economic sense, right? And,
exactly.
And also there's a lot of effort for the amount of benefit at the back end of once you've moved it to the cloud, right?
No, precisely. And I think one of the things you have to watch out for if you do mix the environment, and we've come across examples where, you know, in the risk space, you might have the business as usual risk calculations, but you need some burst capability in the cloud. And I think that's where it can be cost effective. But don't forget the network, you know, that network between your in-house machine rooms and the cloud, that needs to be considered if you're moving a lot of data between.
Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. Final cloud question, and I'm going to put this to you first, Brian, and then Arvin and Claire can discuss this too. But one of the things that I've heard from a number of people I've spoken to since the start of the year is there are dangers around just the cloudification of existing applications. In other words, just moving a technology platform to the cloud. Because that technology platform is not necessarily optimized from a kind of a cloud consumption perspective, from the end user's perspective. So how important, Brian, are cloud native applications from a kind of, especially when it comes to performance issues from the consumer's perspective? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? So the difference between just cloudified existing applications and the development of cloud native applications with real performance and look and feel and rendering and all that sort of stuff, which is hugely important and something that we've actually found is massively important during the start of COVID-19.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I would slightly twist that to say it's not the cloud itself. I think well architected systems, so, you know, horizontally scalable, modular, you know, moving almost towards the microservices sort of side of things. I think they can move to the cloud very easily. So I think, you know, the monolithic legacy systems, I think they're not as easy to move. move, but it's not particularly the cloud. I think it's just not the well architected, in the first place for that scale. So I think having a good architected system is not so difficult to move into the cloud. I think one of the things, as you mentioned there, I think that digitization, so the the more web access for people using the system, and I think that's come a long way. I think the quality that you can get now for web applications compared with the the more desktop applications, I think they're more in line now. So I think that's probably where a lot of the work goes. But I think as long as you have a scalable system, then cloudifying it, as you said, I don't think is a difficult thing to do.
Okay, good. All right. I'd like to ask Arvind and Claire to see whether they have anything to add to that issue, and that is the cloudification of legacy platforms and the inherent the kind of the problems from a consumer's perspective that just cloudifying old kind of monolithic legacy platforms can bring. Arvind, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yeah. A slightly different view, from Brian, is a infrastructure or taking things into the cloud is the trend, but there are many applications which I believe do not need to be taken into the cloud, especially those which are more less periodic or less frequent interactions are needed. If there are payment systems which are mostly batch, then they need not have to be taken into the cloud. And also, it also matters is that what cost it takes versus what's the benefit. And in some of the legacy systems, I don't think so. They do warrant that to be just lifted and shifted into that architecture. That's what I've experienced.
Claire, do you have anything to add to that?
To supplement a bit, I think instead of just storing data on cloud, nowadays Amazon, Microsoft, they have been developing a lot of cool system on cloud. So they want to provide an end-to-end platform. From data storing, data analytics, data preparation, even auto machine learning, and the deployment path. So they provide customers a very fruitful service through cloud systems. So I think it's pretty great, and it's appreciated. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, that's actually a really nice entry to our next the next area of our discussion, and we're going to be talking about data analytics and the extent to which large numbers of capital markets firms are sitting on huge stores of data within their organization that they've either consumed or they've generated over the years. Now, Arvind, I'm going to put this question to you first. What are the challenges capital markets firms face and the operational and business benefits they stand to glean by sifting through all the data that they have within their organization with a view to identifying signals and or trends that allow them to act on that, going forward? So what are the challenges to kind of applying analytics to the data that is sitting within their organization?
Thank you. So there's a lot of data available, like plethora of data available. That's a good thing, but the problem which it comes along with is that much of that data is unstructured and also through channels which are not that I would say that secure. And also the context associated with that is not established. So trying to use all that data together with structured data to glean information out of it or golden nuggets, it becomes difficult because the context of the metadata associated with this unstructured data is not that verified, and also it's not established so that then it can be connected to data points or other structured data to say, okay, this is what the customer trend is, or this is what we see as the data points which can be stringed together to form information which is usable in decision making.
So one of the classic examples of unstructured data is is alternative data sets. I mean, we could be talking about satellite imagery. We could, all sorts of stuff. That is a challenge in itself, is it? When you try to apply traditional data analytics tools to those to unstructured data sets, and with a view to actually mining it and getting usable information out of it?
Yes, definitely. As I said earlier, that data is available. It definitely can be scanned. It can be taken in. But to connect those with structured data, as an example, like in satellite imagery versus the trends of buying, just because a person is there in the retail market, seeing the trend or the data shows that how the movement is, doesn't mean that specifically that even if it's seen that the person visits a certain supermarket 15 times a week, doesn't mean always that that's a buying trend for that community or that group of data users or samples. And that's where the disconnect, or I won't say disconnect, that's where the challenge of using that plethora of data and saying that, here is a trend, because the context is not there for what needs to be to establish exactly the trend. And then that is still a challenge which at least I'm struggling with.
Good. Okay. Claire, you're a data scientist. Talk to us about the challenges that financial services firms face when applying data analytics tools to very large volumes of data. What are the typical challenges that they need to consider?
Yeah, you are right. In a bank, they have a lot of data, and they don't know how to leverage data to get the useful insights, I can say. And most of the time, we have a lot of data. However, some of the data is fragmented, as I mentioned. So the first step, the first challenges, we need to solve this unorganized data. And the second thing is, since we need to work with different parties, different teams, so data assets is another problem, because not everyone can easily get the data assets from the teams.
Yep.
And also the thing is, when we have the data, but most of the time we don't know what our business goal, business objective is, how to leverage the data to bring insight. So most of the time we spend quite a lot of time to talk to the users or the teams to see what their struggle or their ping pong is. It's kind of a consulting service to let them understand what they need from their perspective, not from the data side first. And after they understand their problem or the thing that they want to solve, then we would think, how can we leverage data to solve their problem, and do it step by step. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Brian, I'm going to change the question very slightly and ask from your perspective, to what extent does data analytics kind of enter into Tourstone's world? How much kind of analytics tools do you actually use? How much data analytics or analysis of data do you do as an organization, and what are the challenges that you face?
No, absolutely, and we're moving leaps and bounds there. So I think one of the key things to get right is the data quality. So I think the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, just amplifies when you talk about big data. So I think from our standpoint, post trade is a really good place for high quality data. You tend to have consolidated all your sort of client activity there, or your transaction activity with your clients. You tend to have reconciled that with the outside world. It's your books and records. So it's very high quality data. So I think we believe absolutely this is the sort of right input. So we take from our structured environment and we put into a big data platform, and then we mix that with some of our client specific data and allow them to sort of mix and analyze that, mainly on regulatory reporting and management information type reporting that we do at the moment. But I see that trend starting to move, potentially as we move into it, talking about AI. But I see that trend moving where that analysis can be extremely fruitful for the front office, for example, and client patterns and of how they trade, or what products they or asset classes they like to trade in.
Mm-hmm. Good. Actually, that leads us nicely into the final point of our discussion, and we're going to be talking about AI and the various technologies that sit under the AI umbrella. And I'm going to keep you on the spot, Brian, because I'd like to just put this next question to you. We did have other discussion points available to us to discuss today, but time is marching on and we haven't got a huge amount of time. So let's talk about AI. Clearly, it's the current poster child of the capital markets right now. I've heard a lot about how various AI technologies can actually help improve data quality. That's something that a lot of capital markets technology providers are looking at right now. Do you want to talk very briefly, Brian, about the extent to which a company like Tourstone is using, or is considering, or starting to look at using AI technology to improve, let's not necessarily talk about data quality, but just various processes across the organization?
No, and I think where we're at is making sure we've got that future-proof platform for AI. So I think the mixture of just what we've talked about, the cloud and the big data, forms a fantastic base for getting the right quality and the right expanse of data to use some AI techniques in place. So I think where AI has been extremely useful is natural language, voice recognition, those types of things are very well established. I think we are just at that sort of border of having the platform there to start looking at how AI techniques can help operationally. But I think one thing I would say is, and I think there was a McKinsey report out last year, the leap from a legacy system to a more modern cloud-based system, that's going to give you the vast majority of improvement in automation, certainly from an operational efficiency point of view. I think exception processing has been around for a long time, and I think getting that automation to get those exceptions to individuals, I think is perfect. AI, I see the next step. That's where they're going to be learning from what people are doing with those exceptions to effectively be, exception processing the exceptions themselves. And I think that's where we see the future, certainly in our post-trade space.
Good. I'm going to put the same question to you, Armand, and that is, to what extent do the various technologies that sit under the AI umbrella hold the key to driving operational business value for capital markets firms? Or are we talking about a scenario where AI might end up being totally overblown as a technology in terms of the business benefits to be gleaned on the back of AI?
I hope not. I've seen, definitely have seen clear indications and clear applications of machine learning and AI. Some of the things such Brian mentioned, predicting probabilities of trade execution, or even predicting probabilities of trade confirmation, post-trade confirmation. Definitely, we have seen usage of machine learning and AI. The other things where banks are using AI or machine learning is for AML, fraud detection, and some of that also is being used for cybersecurity. It's playing out things where humans try to say break through a security blanket. They're using machines to do it repeatedly. Also trying to understand what humans take into consideration, and then applying it with speed is what gives the advantage where machine learning comes in very handy.
Okay, Claire, I'm going to put the same question to you. Do you want to talk about the potential that AI holds for financial services firms? And you maybe also want to just touch on a final point. I know we've got to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but also talk about how financial services firms can actually identify use cases that they can apply various AI technologies to, because it's all good and well talking about the benefits of AI. If you cannot apply AI to a use case, it's kind of almost pointless. You've got to be able to apply it to an existing application or an existing business process. in order to get any value, a return on that investment, right? So how do financial services firms identify use cases that they can apply AI to?
Oh yeah, I believe most of people think AI or machine learning is a kind of a buzzword, and it's pretty hard to put it in a business use case. But I realized that when I was working in a bank, they understand their needs. For example, I was working at a risk management team. They understood that they need to predict the loan default rate. So in the previous time, they may use some very traditional method to calculate, to predict which borrower would be for default or default. But as take some reference from some dominant companies, we can see that they have leveraged machine learning algorithms to predict loan default rate, which is pretty successful. So we have developed a R&D team to try those machine learning algorithms and then to try to apply it in those business case. And the other important thing is, I think we should educate our staff, even they are not working in a data team, because we have to work with them closely most of the time. If they don't understand what we are talking about and how to evaluate a data science project, that it's would be a huge hurdles for us to work on a AI or machine learning projects. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Claire. I see that the time now has moved on to about our 40 minutes. Which means that we kind of out of time, so we're going to need to wrap up there. So what I'd like to do is thank Claire Liu, who is at Hong Kong Broadband Network, Arvind Joshi, who is the Director Data Management Lead at Scotiabank, and finally Brian Collings, Chief Executive of Tourstone Technology. The three of you, thank you very much indeed for joining today's panel. I'd like to thank our audience members for watching this clip, and don't forget that, as I mentioned at the top of this call, the Innovation Exchange runs from the 9th of September to the 22nd. So there's a huge amount of ground that we're going to cover during the course of that time. And I hope very much for the majority of you to dip into and out of the sessions that are available to you during the course of that period. Thank you all very much indeed for your time, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.